A lot of people say it's not going to happen to me. That's what Hannah told me. A month before she died, one of her good friends died from fentanyl. And I had a talk with her, and she said, "No, Mom, I would never do that. I'm not that stupid." She actually said that. She trusted somebody because her boyfriend knew him and asked for something and got fentanyl instead. She was very sweet. She loved dogs and cats, any kind of animal, actually. She trained with horses for several years, and she was in the 4-H club for horses and for rabbits. She was very athletic. She was in gymnastics. She was in Girl Scouts for 8 years. And her big thing with Girl Scouts is whenever we did the cookie sales, they always got to choose what they wanted to use the money for. So she had the group do the Humane Society once. She had them do a cat shelter once. And then one year she also did a homeless shelter for battered men, women, and children. She was very mature for her age. She stood up for people. She took care of people. She was always there. She always watched out for everybody. Just very sweet girl, very sweet. She was not really interested in drugs. She drank once in a while. She liked to, hang out with her friends, do the teenage thing and drink. She smoked marijuana a few times, and she did that occasionally. So she was 16 when she passed away, and she had a boyfriend who was 18 at the time. And she was up here in Phoenix. I live in Tucson, and she was living in Tucson with me. But she came up here to stay with her dad for a few months, and she met this guy. She started dating him. And he had a friend at school whose older brother was a drug dealer. And so he used to buy Percocets from his older brother. And I remember Hannah's older sister had told me that Hannah was upset because her boyfriend actually smoked Percocets, which I don't know how that works. But her dad actually found aluminum foil and pills in Hannah's room because he was letting her boyfriend stay there at his house, which I wasn't very thrilled about. So he found it one day when her boyfriend left. Hannah was already at work, and he found him sitting out, and he had told me about it, and he talked to Hannah and the boyfriend, and Hannah just said, I'll talk to him and make sure that he stops, because her dad didn't want to throw him out because he thought if he threw him out that Hannah would leave too, because she really liked this boy. And she talked to him. But exactly a week later, she decided that she wanted to call this drug dealer on her boyfriend's phone because her phone was broken. And she asked him for some Adderall. And he actually brought it over to the house. And she asked him for 3. So he gave her 3. And she took 1. And she lost her life. She was unconscious, blue, not breathing, when her boyfriend noticed that he couldn't wake her up after her dad came home from dinner with my son. And then her dad tried CPR on her, and that didn't work. So by the time the paramedics got there, they administered the Narcan, and she got a pulse back. But from the time that they realized that she was not breathing, she had already been down for they don't know how long, but she was already brain dead at that point. I was in Tucson, and I got a call from my son. It was his birthday when this happened, and it was his 21st birthday. So I thought he was calling me to tell me how his birthday went with his dad, you know, because his dad took him out to dinner. And my son called, and I was actually at a club getting ready to video my boyfriend's band, because I was the videographer for his band. And I was sitting there talking to someone, and the phone rang, and it was really loud. So I ignored the call the first time, and my son called right back. And so I was like, I'm going to go outside and talk to him because it's his birthday. And I picked up the phone, and he just started yelling and screaming, saying, I think Hannah's dead. And I thought he was joking at first, because I thought, oh, it's his birthday. Maybe he was drinking. Maybe he got a little buzzed, and they're playing a trick on me. And I told him that that wasn't funny. And he said, no, you know, she's blue. Her lips are blue. She's not breathing. We think she might be dead. And from there, I left the club and went straight up to Phoenix. And she was at the hospital. And she was in the ICU. And when I saw her, it was really hard, because she had the tubes coming out of everywhere. Her dad told me that it looks worse than it is. And I thought, okay, well, maybe, you know, they're just waiting for her to wake up. But then the doctor came in and told me and her dad and her sister that they don't think that, you know, she's going to come out of this, because she was down for too long. And they said the amount of Narcan that they administered to her, and it didn't bring her back out of it, took the paramedics about 9 minutes of them working on her, on top of how long her dad was working on her, which was about 15 minutes. And then we don't know exactly how long she was down before that. So they said that whatever brain cells were still alive were actually dying. So when she first got there, she wasn't completely brain dead. But they did 3 brain death tests on her over the next 36 hours. And by the time they did the first one at 12 hours after she was there, she already had 0 brain activity. But they had to go through all 3 of them just to make sure. But they had told us that if she came out of it, it would be a miracle, and that she wouldn't be the same person. So, of course, we still held on to that glimmer of hope that, you know, maybe a miracle would happen and she would come out of it. But there was all of her brain activity was gone before that, the first 12 hours. So she was completely gone, but we still had to wait 36 hours for them to confirm it. It was difficult because we had to sit there with her. It didn't even look like her. You know, it was hard to look at her because she wasn't being funny. She was very sarcastic and funny. She'd walk into a room and she would just start saying something random just to make her presence known. And just, you know, seeing her like that was hard, because every time I see a picture of her, you know, with her smiling or whatever she's doing, being silly, I get that image of her in the hospital right after I see a picture of her, even still, and it's been almost 6 years. There was an investigation. It didn't start out very well at first. Maricopa County Police didn't want to take her case because they said it was fentanyl, and they don't deal with fentanyl. That has to go through the DEA. That's not true. They just didn't want to take her case. They didn't want to deal with it. So they told me they were going to send her file over to the DEA and that I would be hearing from them. And I waited about 2 weeks, and finally I said, okay, this is taking too long. So I called the DEA, and I kept getting an answering machine, like voicemail. So I was leaving messages and I wouldn't get a call back. So I finally called again, and I said, if I don't hear back from somebody, I'm going to come down to your building and I'm going to stand out in front of the building until somebody comes and talks to me. And so I had an agent call me back, and you could tell he was very irritated with me. And he said, because I had mentioned her name, I had given her name, her date of birth, the date of death, all the information I could. and said, I want to know what's going on and where you're going with this case. And he called me and he says, I don't even know what you're talking about. He says, we don't have any file on this Hannah person. And I said, well, I was told it was going to be sent over to you and that you guys were going to investigate. Because the police even came out as soon as they called her time of death. Within an hour, there was a police officer at the hospital, and he had to take pictures of her. He had to take pictures of her entire body, completely exposed, and they needed to just see if she had bruises or, anything on her. So they did that, and I said, they came down, they took pictures, they said there's going to be a case, and nothing. And so he told me, he says, well, I don't have anything. They never sent me anything, and I don't know what you're talking about. And so he ended up calling Maricopa County Police Department, Sheriff's Department, and called me back about an hour later, and he said, all right, well, I have the file. I looked it over, and I'm going to talk to my supervisor and see what we can do. And it still took them a while to do anything. They couldn't find the guy that gave her the fentanyl. The Maricopa County Police said that he turned off his phone and didn't have the phone number anymore, but her boyfriend called me 3 weeks later and said he still got that phone because I just talked to him. And so I had the phone number, and I contacted him and pretended like I was somebody else and pretended like I just randomly got the wrong number and started talking to him and found out that he moved to Tucson, which is where I lived. And I ended up getting a lot of information out of him as to where he works, when he works, what his schedule is. And I went down to his work and took pictures of him and then sent them over to the DEA, and I gave them his schedule and said, I found him. Nobody else found him, but I found him. So, why did I have to do your guys' job? And they ended up coming down to Tucson and arresting him and bringing him back up to Phoenix about almost 6 months after this happened. But they had to release him the same day. And so he was back in Tucson, and then COVID hit. And so it took about 2 years of COVID to completely put a halt to everything. It was September of 2021, and they indicted him. And then they were pushing the trial back for almost 2 years after that. The defense kept asking for a continuance on the trial. So after 2 more years of that, we finally talked, and they said they wanted to offer him a plea deal so that we wouldn't have to go to trial and the family wouldn't have to relive all of this. And he agreed to a plea deal, so he pled guilty. And his case, or her case, is actually the first federal case in the state of Arizona that they were able to prosecute somebody for causing the death of somebody else from fentanyl. It took 4.5 years, though. And he only got 6 years in federal prison. But that's why I do what I do now. And, I did it at first to fight for her, which I'm always still going to fight for her. But it's very sad that on a federal level in the state of Arizona, her case is the first case. And that he only got 6 years for it. So I don't think that's enough. She's not going to be back in 6 years. He's going to get to see his family again when he gets out. He gets to watch his kids grow up, and I don't get to watch her. I got 16 years with her, but I don't get to see her graduate high school. I don't get to see her get married. I don't get to see her have her babies. So I was going to make sure that he was going to be known for what he did, and she was going to be known for what happened to her. And now everybody knows. And if I would have just sat back and let them take control, then, he would still be out there today and there would be no justice for her. She pushed me. I know she pushed me because what happened to her shouldn't have happened. And I wasn't going to let that go away until something happened. She got some kind of justice, and I think because of what happened with this case that other people are going to get some kind of justice as well. I'm a volunteer for Donate Life Arizona, or Donor Network of Arizona, because she was an organ donor, and she did save 5 lives. So I do that. I actually work at a hospital, and I'm one of the coordinators for the hospital for Donate Life. So I do that. I work on that. I work with AFID, the organization. I'm on the board with them. So we're out there trying to do things to make a difference and raise awareness. Her case set a precedent here in Arizona. And now they're getting more people to go after these drug dealers, knowing that they can convict now. She was an organ donor, and she saved 5 lives, and one of them was she had a heart recipient, and her heart recipient, I've always wanted to meet the heart recipient because I wanted to hear her heartbeat. And her heart recipient contacted me one day and asked me if I would be okay if she sent me something. And I said, sure. So about a week later, I got something in the mail from her, and I opened it up, and it was a Build-A-Bear that she had a recording of her heartbeat put inside of it. So you squeeze the little paw, and you can hear the actual recording of her heart recipient's heartbeat inside of it.